the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vicky. And I also would like to welcome everybody to this really important seminar. Well, everybody, I don't think I need to convince you who are participating, but research ethics is really the fundamental of research. If we don't keep the ethics when it comes to research, we lose a lot of credibility, and this is really highly important to every researcher, I guess. So I'm really glad that we have today a very high number of participants, but also having good, important people giving us input and having a good discussion, hopefully today. I won't take much of this time. I'd like to just remind everybody that we have a research group consisting of research facilitators, advisors at the UNICA University members. So if you are interested in joining our group, please contact the Secretariat, UNICA Secretariat, and we're happy to have more members in our group, hopefully giving input and contributing to our work. With that, I'll leave the floor to Dorian, and Dorian, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you, of course, for the interest in ethics, which is, as you describe it, extremely important, and it's becoming more and more important as the time goes by. I'm going to share my screen. And I hope it will work.
Perfect. But please don't forget to close our pictures.
I will. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
We will be talking a little bit. Please send me a message when I'm running out of time. I don't want to take advantage of your hospitality. Plus, it would be nice to have more time for discussion. Thank you. We will be speaking about Horizon Europe and the ethics process as it has been launched and how it differs from Horizon 2020. I know that most of you, or a lot of you, know the Horizon 2020 process, and you have been already involved one way or the other in Horizon Europe with the first calls. Nevertheless, repetition is the mother of learning, so here we go. We know, all of us, no matter where we work, that in research, a lot of these activities are done because, for us, ethics makes research better. Ethics is an enhancer of excellence. It's not a red tape mechanism. A lot of us try to fight against this belief that ethics is a red tape mechanism and it basically stops good research from happening. It is not true at all. And of course, we need to prove it. We need to prove it to the funders, but also to the policymakers, and most importantly, to the researchers themselves. And at the end of the day, ethics is part of this beautiful framework that we have to build trust for research. And we see how important this is, especially now during the times of the pandemic. The Ethics and Integrity Lifeline has an operational, but also a policy framework. So briefly, the policy is in, at least for Horizon, is what we call the ERA, the European Research Area. And you have seen last summer that we have published and the member states have approved the ERA Pact. Of course, we have the Horizon Europe regulation, and most important in the daily operations, we have the Horizon Europe grant agreement. And in all three of these frameworks, ethics is very well represented and taken account of. First of all, for the pact, ethics, for the first time, I think, in a research policy related document, ethics appears as the top, although there is no priority in the values, obviously, at the top value for building this framework of research and innovation, which applies throughout all our activities and with our stakeholders, which of course are the funders, the public, business, private initiatives, and of course the research community. So this is extremely important that now it's signaled as an important value to take into account every time that we design, fund, and implement research. The regulation, the Horizon Europe regulation, which is law in all our countries, in all the participatory countries, is representing ethics very well in Article 19. And basically there it says that whatever we do has to comply with ethical principles and, of course, the relevant union, national, and international legislation. For the first time, again, in the legislative text, we have at this high level the mention of the European Code of Research Integrity, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. The Model Grant Agreement, so this is the contract that we sign together, the framework program and the beneficiaries, also has very strong articles that relate to ethics and research integrity, reminds everybody involved, reminds everybody that receives EU money, that this is one of the issues that they have to follow, be careful, and act upon. In the legal order, the article of the Model Grant Agreement is not a good to have, it's a must have. So all the terms that are noted in the grant agreement have to be followed. It's not the best effort, it's a must do. Of course, we also give reference to, as I said before, to the European Code of Research Integrity. This shows how much the legislator and the member states and the European Parliament increase the emphasis that they give to ethics and research integrity, since they're taking a soft instrument like the code and refer it into the regulation and into the grant agreement. More specifically, the ethics in Horizon Europe. Now, we know that there are three basic elements when you operationalize ethics. So when you go from the principles to the bench, how do I go from the principles to the bench? Well, there you need, of course, the knowledge, but you need to have time. And we know that all of our researchers, a lot of our research managers are very short on time. But unfortunately, ethics cannot be done as the last minute. Ethics can only be done if you start early, if you think about the topics that the issues that your research raises, in order to prepare yourself. Even if Horizon Europe didn't exist, or even if the ethics articles of Horizon Europe didn't exist, and you only had the funding, you needed to take care of the issues that are raised by your research, the ethics issues, in order for your research to become acceptable, to become excellent, and to become socially relevant. Of course, at the research level and the institutional level, you have to have support. We cannot dump everything on the research teams and the researchers themselves. Everybody has to share in that responsibility. We see more and more that EU offices, or investment offices as they call it, or funding offices they call it, some institutions, are being built better and stronger in order to provide this type of support for different issues, including ethics and research integrity, but it's absolutely necessary to have this type of support. And of course, at the end of the day, I know that most of you, a lot of you are involved in these actions. You need education and training actions on ethics in order for the researchers that do not necessarily come from the medical research fields to understand what we are talking about. Obviously, the advent of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, genetic editing currently, but also before, the interest in research in security have raised all the profile of ethics and the knowledge that is necessary in order to achieve what is described in the different texts that we have, both at the European and the national level. Ethics and integrity has not changed much as far as the policy framework, thus from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe. We still say that is a prerequisite for achieving excellence. It's necessary to build trust, and it's not a red tape mechanism. The guiding principles that we have, and those are reflected on Article 19, still remain the same. I highlighted in red 3 areas that I know are present in our discussions in all kinds of research. So the issue of privacy, the issue of protection of personal data, and of course the high levels of human health protection, which we see now creeping in other areas that are not necessarily what would be considered your straightforward medical research. In social sciences, for example, when we do studies about young people spending a lot of time on the internet, this also has to do with health protection, because we have seen what the adverse results can be of abusing a technology or a process, or trying to convince our children not to spend so much time in front of the PC. So we see those issues are again similar as in Horizon 2020. What differs slightly over the years in the framework program is the attribution of clear responsibilities. Both in FP7 and Horizon 2020, ethics took it upon itself to address many issues that had to do mostly with legal implementation rather than with ethics principles. This is very clear in the area of privacy and personal data protection. And we have a legal framework that can guarantee that the legal obligations that all of us have, and the researchers and the research institutions have vis-a-vis the regulation, are followed. Ethics has to take its responsibility when it comes to this issue by not trying to make sure that the law is followed. This is somebody else's responsibility. So it is clear in Horizon Europe, and we see it clearly among the different institutions and the beneficiaries that participate, that this sharing of responsibility and clear division of labor, so to speak, is becoming more and more obvious and evident, for the simple reason that ethics cannot resolve all the issues that are addressed through the legal compliance. We have, of course, the same activities that are not eligible for funding, any activity that has to do with human cloning, and of course, the special condition that no matter what activities we carry out, no destruction of human embryos is allowed. The main then changes in the ethics issues table, which is the table that describes the research areas that might raise ethics issues, remain 90% the same as in Horizon 2020, with 2 main differences. The first that we see here for human embryos and fetuses is a rephrasing, so it's not a difference. What we see as a difference is that in Horizon Europe, we will not anymore deal with issues related to Item 11, exclusive focus on civil applications. This is a responsibility that is taken up higher up, either by the beneficiary or, if it's needed, by the project officer and the scientific panel. And of course, the issue of dual use that is not looked anymore as a dual use issue under the ethics process. It could be seen under Item 10, cross-cut issues, potential misuse of results, but under that umbrella, the potential misuse, not the issue of dual use, which relates, of course, to the regulation for dual use export controls. By the way, while we moved dual use out of ethics in our process, the dual use people in digital trade are moving towards dual use and human right protection, especially in the area of cybersecurity. So ethics is still in the discussion of dual use, but as a process in Horizon Europe, we do not look at dual use. Artificial intelligence, of course, is a new item on the table, and it's part of both the scientific and the ethics evaluation. It is split in Horizon Europe in the two areas. So the scientific evaluation takes care more about the technical robustness, the innovative nature of the proposal, the proposed protocols, and or IT tools or whatever else they would like to do. And the ethics takes care mostly or discusses the trustworthy area of artificial intelligence. Thus, we allow the discussion to be again shared by the people that are responsible for the evaluation of the research proposals. The process then. Of course, no matter what we say concerning the shared responsibility, it is important that a great part of the responsibility stays with the applicant. He or she knows what the research area is, what are the issues that are raised by the research area that they're going to research, including the ethics issues. So the responsibility has to start and finish with them. What we always say thus is that there are certain tasks that the researchers have to do when they start addressing ethics issues. First of all, they still need to learn to seek advice from colleagues and expertise in the ethics of research. You hear it, we hear it many times, even today, after 20 years of ethics review in the framework programs, there are still researchers that say, it's not for me. Ethics is something that has to be dealt only by the medical or the biosciences. Obviously, this is not true anymore. I cannot find information. And basically, that's why I didn't put forward a proper ethics part in my application. We know that this is true, but we still have to send the message that advice is available, information is available, and they just have to Google it, so to speak, to start with. Obviously, they can go to a department in the host institution, in the university or research institute where they work, and ask either the philosophy department or the law department if they have. The information is always there. Obviously, they have to start thinking and discussing about ethics while designing the research protocols. This is extremely important. We see many times that the researchers try to address ethics the last minute. So if the deadline of the application is 12 o'clock on the 24th, they start thinking about ethics at 11 o'clock on the 24th. It's not possible. This is a worst case scenario, obviously. It is not possible. Obviously, they will not do a proper job. So they have to start thinking about ethics, not as a red tape mechanism that is a problem that they have to overcome, but rather as a constituent part of their research. That's what we call, anyway, in a sense, ethics by design. Think and build your ethics in your process, in your research protocols, in the thinking that you are doing for the research that you are going to undertake. And of course, last but not least, we mentioned it before, ethics issues are in many areas, not only in the medical field. So it is important that as researchers, but also as institutions, we protect the volunteers that participate in our research as research subjects, but also we protect ourselves. Many times, a lot of our researchers, especially in social sciences, but not only, like to go in very difficult areas in the world, war zones, conflict areas, and do research there, and they do not think about their own protection. Ethics has that education and training role that apart from your subjects, you also think about yourself and the institution that you come from. Protect the reputation, but also protect your own well-being. All this information that I described, and I like to put it here and note at the end, is available online. So all the process is in our program guide. And of course, we have in the program guide, you will see references to all the guidance notes and briefing reference material that we have. But also you can find on YouTube a very detailed training about Horizon Europe and more particular about the new area that we are all concerned with, the ethics by design in artificial intelligence. So those can be seen, can be shared, and I think they are very useful tools in preparation of support, education and training, and help for the research community. Obviously, what the researchers must do is to identify all potential ethics issues, handle those aspects of the proposal, so they have to address them, not only to identify them, not only tick a box, but they also have to describe how, in detail, how those issues will be addressed, how you will protect personal data, how you will do your informed consent, all these issues that are part of the ethics issues list. And of course, you have to do that because it's apart from the legal obligation that you have from the regulation, is also part of the Horizon Europe grant agreement. So you sign as a researcher that you're going to do all those things that are described in the presentation or in our guidance notes. The ethics appraisal thus is can be split in three major headings. First of all is what the applicant has to do, which is to identify the ethics issues table, to identify the ethics issues in the ethics issues table, and prepare its own ethics self-assessment. Then it comes to the Commission. So before a grant is signed, all the proposals will go through what we call an ethics screening. And for the severe, complex, and serious cases, we'll have the ethics assessment process. If a project is ready and passes this process, the contract, the grant agreement will be signed. And during the life of the project, depending on the issues that are raised, we are going to have what we call an ethics check or a review of selected projects. Obviously, this is something that it's not done for all projects, although the numbers are increasing and more projects go through the process of ethics checks and review. But this is to show to the host institutions and to the research community that ethics does not stop ex ante. Ethics continues during the life of the project, and obviously we as European Commission have the responsibility to make sure that what the applicant promised in the grant agreement that they will do, they will actually do. And again, the ethics checks and review is not a policing mechanism. It's a mechanism of advice and support. Obviously, if there is no reaction from the beneficiary, don't be surprised to find out that there are some beneficiaries, a small, minute minority, but they exist, that do not care and do not interact with the European Commission, even during the period of an ethics text or an ethics review. In that case, more strict measures are taken, for example, termination of the grant. So it's not something that we leave also as a promissory note. We follow it up during the life of the project. That's how this is a screenshot, of course, of the ethics issues table. For some of you that you have not seen, it describes the activity, what is requested, what the activity entails. So what kind of let's say if we talk about involved human participants, if there are volunteers in non-medical studies, exactly to differentiate between very strict regulation that applies in medical studies and important but not as strict, obviously, processes that we have for informed consent in social sciences, for example. Are they healthy volunteers? Are there patients? Are they vulnerable? Children, minors, and persons unable to give informed consent. So you see that all those are the issues that we try to help the applicant in answering, and thus understanding, seeing, realizing that there is some work to be done in the future if one of those issues is ticked. In the self-assessment then, which is part of the application, we also try to give a hand to the applicants, especially newcomers, people that maybe are not exposed to the ethics issues, that are not aware, or maybe even applicants that do not have good support systems at their host institutions. The quality and the quantity of the support in many of the institutions varies. So if you do not have good support for whatever reason, you have to do a lot of those things with your colleagues in the same department, or sometimes if it's individual fellowships, all by yourself. In order to build that help into the process, we have prepared the guidance that's called How to Complete Your Ethics Self-Assessment, that takes the applicant by the hand, goes in all the different areas of the ethics issues table. Those are the majority of the ethics areas that are raised by the majority of our research, and tells the applicant what they need to do, what they need to provide in every single of those areas, thus helping them to do a proper job in the ethics part. It is obvious for all these reasons, because the How to Complete Your Ethics Self-Assessment is a 45, 48-page document. We don't expect and we don't want, unless there is strong personal interest, for the applicant to read the whole document. They have to read the document that relates to the specific research issue that is raised by their application. So it's 48 pages, but the data protection, for example, is 1.5 pages, right? Volunteers and informed consent is each one is 1 page plus. So with, again, guidance notes, reference material, if you want to go into much more detail. And of course, a lot of our applicants, as you said in the beginning, have the local support that is also trained and able to provide the support that is needed. That's how the How to Complete Your Self-Assessment looks like in the table, because there is also the text. And this is what we call internally the ethics wings. This is that gives support to the whole idea of doing ethics properly. So the question is, does your activity involve humans, yes or no? And then you see the information that they need to provide, they need to include in their proposal, and even the documents that need to be kept on file and provided to the European Commission when it is requested. Obviously, it's not possible that this is an exhaustive list, but it's a list that covers the majority of the cases. In the self-assessment then, which is in the part of the application, they have to go and explain the ethical dimension of the objectives, methodology, and likely impact. Most of us, we have seen applications where this is an important part of the application. The impact is very highly valued in the scientific evaluation. It could make the difference between a proposal that is funded and a proposal that is not funded. And of course, it has an impact also in the ethics part, as we see for activities that involve, for example, climate, artificial intelligence, and stigmatization of particular social groups. So it is an important issue to consider in the ethics self-assessment. And we also have a small part which helps not only the ethics, but in the general positioning of the application, the compliance with ethical principles and relevant legislation. We said in the beginning that ethics should not be a compliance mechanism, and it's not. But this is also a way to give a message to some of the applicants that there is a legislation that they have to follow independently of the ethics. So it's a message to send out that, listen, if you deal with data protection, there is a legislation. I would be very surprised if there is anybody in the research community that does not know that the data protection regulation exists, but, well, we can always be surprised. The other issue that the applicants, but also the support mechanisms in the host institutions have to take into account is that ethics panels all over the world and in the European Commission are usually risk averse if you are not ready, if you do not have a proper ethics assessment, self-assessment done. It is not a negative, because their job is to check. Their job, the ethics panel job, is to make sure that you understand the area that you are going into from an ethical and social impact perspective. So it is very obvious to ethics panels when you cut and paste. Usually, unfortunately, again, if it's done at the last minute, the cut and pasting sometimes corresponds to your issues, sometimes it doesn't. If you give us an ethics self-assessment that cuts and pastes from the data protection regulation or from the Helsinki Accord or from any document that is out there, we know that you have not done the work to relate to the issues that are raised by your proposal. So you cut and paste it and you think like this, you have done a good job in the ethics. Panels know that this is the case and they treat these proposals more carefully. So you will see a lot more requirements, a lot more red tape in proposals like this, just because you have not been able to show to the ethics experts that you know what the area that you are dealing with, the ethics issues that are raised by the research area that you're conducting. The ethics appraisal outcomes thus, so in the whole process, is that you get a clearance, so you're ready to go, you don't have ethics issues, or that you do have ethics issues, but you possibly need some support. So that support is either an ethics advisor or an ethics board that our experts request to have to be added to your research in order to provide the advice and support that you need. And of course, in certain cases, if the ethics experts are not very comfortable, they might even ask for an ethics review or an ethics check during the life of the project. This is the outcome of the first stage, which we call screening. Contrary to Horizon 2020, and I think we are going to discuss that, yes, a little bit, but I'll go there directly.
Yeah, sorry, you were asking, Dorian, can you hear me? Sorry, you were asking me to make you aware of the time, and now I'm doing so. So time is slowly over, and we also have some questions. So just want to let you know.
Okay, I'm wrapping up now. Just about the new conditions in Horizon Europe, which is basically that in the screening we do not have any more contractual requirements. The screening is only a flagging. All the proposals, which is approximately 90% of the proposals, are only screened, become the responsibility of the host institution. The Commission can go back and see, but you would not receive any requirements from the screening that become contractual requirements in the grant agreement. So it is a simplification process, but simplification always comes with a caveat, and the caveat is that much more responsibility is put back on the shoulders of the host institutions. There is a long part of the presentation later on specific issues, so if you want to see it, you can go ahead and browse. I will only go, sorry that going down that fast, I would like to show you very briefly the decision tree that we have for data, which is this one. You can find it online. That takes you by the hand and helps you address data protection and privacy issues that are raised by your proposal. So it starts with very big questions that the research involve processing, and then it goes down in a decision tree fashion in order to help you address those issues. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry I took a little bit longer than anticipated. Thank you. Do you give me the questions, or do I have to read the chat? I see 11 points on the chat.
Maryam will read them. So, but if you see one that, you can immediately answer, then just go ahead.
Ethics is an integral part of excellence. Should the ethics session be scored in the same way as? Very good question. You might, UNICA might participate, actually. I'm not 100% sure, but if you don't participate, you should. There is a big discussion with European University Association, with LERU, with Science Europe, with Jeroen, on the review of the assessment system. And I think if you do not participate, I do not know, please go there. Ethics and research integrity is seen as one of the issues that might be rewarded, but we do not know the outcome of that discussion, but it's definitely something that they're considering at the European level. We are considering at the European level. in Horizon, we always say that we do not want to make ethics as part of the scoring, because as you know, and I do not reveal any big secret, it is extremely rare that we will stop an ethics proposal, a proposal because of ethics. We like to invest time and exchange and interact with the research community and the applicant. We think that if you stop a proposal because of ethics, nobody has learned anything and people got very upset. If you interact, and it takes time, sometimes we run out of the grant agreement period, gets researchers very upset, but it's better to get upset because they lost 2 or 3 months than that they lost the whole application. So we like to interact. Maybe that will change, especially if it's become part of the scoring. But for the moment, no. We do ethics after the scoring. How do you think the dialogue with researchers and research ethics can be facilitated? We have to stop seeing these two categories as separate categories. Most of our research experts, ethics experts, come from the research community. The number of ethics experts that are trained to do evaluation of research is very limited. So what we do in Horizon Europe, because we don't produce them fast enough, and you will see all these challenges that we have with artificial intelligence. Very soon, we will not have experts to do the evaluation of artificial intelligence projects. There are many out there, but a lot of them are already involved in the research. So they're not independent. So we're going to have this kind of drought of experts in front of us very soon. It's the same community. And this discussion, as a lot of you know that have done training and awareness activities in the host institutions, has to start in the host institutions. What we do here is on top and in addition. A lot of institutions, what they do, and ERC does it too, and we do it, but at the check period, so during the life of the project, is we invite the beneficiaries to discuss with the ethics experts. The discussion is extremely important. Paper cannot convey always the reality. We cannot do it ex ante, so during the evaluation process, because we just don't have the resources. But it could be possible in the near future if we win the ethics lotto and we have funds and resources to do that too. But it works very well. And if it's done at the local level, it's more effective. Clear responsibility. Yes. The attributing of responsibility to researchers. No. We attribute responsibility to the host institutions. It's the host institutions that sign the grant agreement with us. Obviously, even within an institution, there are processes to examine if the individual actions were correct or not. And we also have processes to examine if individual activities, individual actions fall within ethical, unethical, misconduct, etc. All what we do is always in a connection and in the support of the host institution. We never approach the individual researcher on a one-to-one basis. We always go via the host institution. So the responsibility of 90% of the proposals that are considered to be low or medium risk remain solely with the host institutions that have to support the ethics work that is done there.
Please take the last questions that came from the participants, from the audience.
Because then we need the tension between ethics and open science.
I meant are you considering connections between ethics risk assessment and the recent guidelines? Are you considering the connections between ethics assessment and the recent guidelines for? Yes. Again, I underline the recent guidelines, and there in the ethics we. Of course, we do not look at the interference part because we are not, this requires a specialization and expertise that are not usually available in the ethics panels. It's a separate procedure if we want to go into it. But in the ethics risk assessment, we always look
what are the proposed activities and where they will take place, always under the framework of protecting the individuals, our researchers, and protecting the host institutions. And of course, the research subjects that they are going to be using when they go outside Europe and they do research in areas that are not within the European legal order. The discussion with foreign interference, as you know, still goes on, and we have to approach it very, very carefully. And we expect to learn a lot from the member states that already are involved. You saw the discussion in Holland, in the Netherlands a week ago. So there are issues that are in America, we don't discuss it, FBI is involved, etc. So we are trying to learn also from actual cases that appear in the member states level. Thank you.
I think, if I may just break in, I think we have one question that actually I think it would be good to have Dorian to answer it. It's the relationship between open science and ethics. I'm sorry. Protection. I think Aliyah had.
So maybe I can clarify.
Yes, yes, please.
Because one of the biggest tension there is I'm president of the ethics committee at Sorbonne Nouvelle University, where there is the fields that we cover are social science and humanities, and mostly the humanities. The field that does in which ethics is the most concerned would be probably linguistics in our university. And the participants that we need to protect the most are sensitive populations, children and handicapped people, from which we collect either experimental data or ecological data in homes or schools and so on. And there really is a tension between protecting those sensitive populations and open science, the fact that we want our results to be able to be checked, not only checked, but also for the data to be available so that other linguists could understand, or other, if it's social sciences, it would be the same. So there's video data, there's audio data, and so there's really a tension between protecting participants who have given their informed consent. I'm saying that they have given it. We, of course, would not share data where the participants have not given their consent. But beyond the consent, what do we do to protect those participants, but at the same time participate in open science? And that's really a tension we encounter in a lot of the projects we review.
It is true, and I do not have a ready answer for that. My concern from an ethics perspective is the protection of the participants is fundamental. And the application of the informed consent process, it's also fundamental. So how it is done, how much leadway it gives to the researcher is a question of the original design of the informed consent. And there are very big tensions and geographical differences in seeing how we acquire and what this informed consent covers. Obviously, we also are, if you like, victims of the fact that informed consent is a tool that comes from the biomedical field, from the medical sciences. And we try to take a tool that has been perfected there and apply it to other areas of research that creates even more tensions, because a lot of the researchers themselves are not trained to do a proper informed consent for the duration, right? I'm not talking about the actual time. Usually it's about the duration. The ownership of the data also is extremely important. The data that you produce are owned by whom? Those are questions that have different answers in different legal jurisdictions. Universities think that the data belong to them. Researchers think that the data belong to them, right? They are not always very clear answers when you do the research, not when you go to court. So it is extremely important from my perspective to take care of the protection of the participants. And like in the medical field, many other disciplines, imagine now with the artificial intelligence tools that we are going to have, right? We have to build data protection into the machine system in order to have enhanced data protection when we use the tools, not when we go to publish. So data protection by design, in a sense. I do not have a clear answer. It is a very difficult process. Mm-hmm. Our concern is you do utmost to protect in the beginning, and then you try to see how much of this data in an aggregate form you can publish. But the videos, for example, I think without explicit informed consent for the duration, possible uses, I will be very hesitant to liberate.
No, but I'm only talking about data that has informed consent, and even after the children become adults. So I'm only talking about that data. The other important issue we have at another level is that to answer the question whether researchers are sufficiently motivated to tackle research issues, I think that the problem is that most researchers that I talk to and or review, well, are motivated, their main motivation is funding and publication. And it's not protection of the participants. They should think of the participants before, so it's only because you constrain them through the funding system and systems and through the journals that they will be aware of protection, but it doesn't come from their own. And so how do we deal with that? How do we train at least our PhD students to become aware of the importance of protecting the participants?
You're absolutely right. That's why it was part of my first slides, education and training. You cannot expect to change the culture, because research has that culture, funding and publication. This has a culture that has been around for centuries even. So it's very difficult to change that through only a ticking exercise process, which is the ethics review. The ethics review is ethics in the middle, right? In the 2-hour movie about ethics, ethics review is 10 minutes in the middle. You know the main actors, you know the potential impact, but you don't follow what happens in the second part of the movie. So we do, through ethics and sex, so and so. But the ethics review cannot resolve all these issues. Those issues have to be resolved, as you said, education, training in the beginning, in the design, what we call ethics by design. It takes time. Our medical students don't do it correctly sometimes, right? Now, if you go to court with a medical case, you'll be very frequently surprised because the judges make a difference between available knowledge and assumed knowledge. In orphan diseases, for example, there is a different criterion to process legally a case about cancer because the judges assume that there is widely shared knowledge, and about a rare disease because the knowledge is not widely shared. So in a court of law, those issues can be disentangled, but we don't want to go there, do we? So the best way is to try to address them as early as possible.
I just want to make a couple of points. It's John Pearson from the VB. We need to start our panel session. I guess in effect we already really have, because we've already got a very interesting discussion going. I just wanted to also make a point about the cultural change. One of the things that I've seen that's quite interesting is that I started working at my current institution in 2018, when we had really just started our Ethics Committee for Social Sciences and Humanities. I went to a session with some researchers from, I think, the social sciences, particularly the psychology department, and it was pretty intense. They were actually quite hostile to what we were doing. I had some very bizarre questions about the value of ethics and so on. So that was about 4 years ago now. And since then, we now have the ethics committee has become more established, and we actually are quite overloaded with a number of requests and approvals that we have to give out. And it's really been quite interesting to see the cultural change. I think the committee has been accepted by the researchers. It's taken a lot more seriously by the researchers, and when we organize trainings, I can almost guarantee that if I do a session on social sciences, humanities, it will be well attended, and the quality of participation is very high, which is very interesting to see. It's quite a relatively rapid cultural change, I think, if I'm understanding what's going on correctly. But one of the interesting things is that a lot of what's been done has not really been legally mandated. A lot of, okay, the data protection stuff, yes, but other stuff is things that the researchers have to do voluntarily. I don't know if this interest has become stronger because of the GDPR, or whether it's that people are actually inherently motivated more. It's quite an interesting phenomenon to see. So I think it's discussion, does the legal mandating help? Does it push people to think about other issues as well? Or is it that people are kind of more inherently motivated? I don't really know the answer, but certainly there's a certain cause for optimism in the sense that we've had quite a rapid cultural change. But in any case, that was a bit of an aside. I'd like to move on a bit to the panel discussion. We've got various kind of guiding questions that I'd maybe like to put to our three panelists today. I'll very quickly introduce the panelists before we start. Unfortunately, one of the panelists wasn't able to join us today due to family and illness issues. So we were going to have Carmen Toros from Tallinn University, but she's unfortunately unable to join us, but we still have three very important and very distinguished panelists who are going to hopefully provide a very interesting discussion. So Aliyah Morgernstern has already contributed very valuably. So Aliyah is from the Sorbonne Nouvelle University. As she mentioned, it's a university focused on social sciences and humanities. She's currently president of the Research Ethics Committee there, and also a full professor in linguistics, focusing on multimodal interaction and language acquisition. And Antonella Ficorilli is from the Society of Epidemiology and Prevention, Giulio and Maccacaro from Milan. She's a bioethicist and she has a PhD from bioethics at Bologna University. And she's conducted research activities at Oxford and other scientific institutions. And she's currently participating in a Horizon 2020 project as an external ethics advisor, I think. And finally, Ara Kivelasco, excuse my pronunciation of the names. She's Senior Advisor in Research Management at the University of Helsinki, and she's the University's Research Integrity Coordinator and Secretary of the Ethical Review Board in Humanities and Social and Behavioural Scientists. So she holds quite a similar position to the one I do at the VUB, I think. So we've got an interesting combination of academics and administrative people in our panel, which is always good. So I'd like to move on to one of the first of the guiding questions we identified, which was a general question about how the panelists perceive the motivation of researchers to participate in ethics procedures and how their motivation to integrate ethics into their projects. So I think to put the question to Aura first, Aura from Helsinki, and then we'll put it to the other panelists as well.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me into this panel. I think this is a good question. I think it depends on the researchers. Some of our researchers are highly motivated, and for example, our review boards are the members are academics. They are there voluntarily, giving advice to other researchers as a panel member, as members of the boards. But then there are those others who think that the ethics is just another administrational task to do, and I think this keynote speech was excellent. I recognized the things that I see in my work, and especially in applying funding. Some researchers just think that they need some magic words so that they will comply the ethics. They say there's certain concepts and then it's done. But this is an excellent point of view that you need to think about the ethics from the very beginning of the research project and when planning it.
Okay, thank you, Aura. And then Antonella, would you also like to respond?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I'm very glad to be here and thank you for invitation. Yeah, I think that researchers are not sufficiently motivated to address ethics issues because I think that they often consider them as something which is not within their competence. No, I think that Sometimes researchers think that ethical issues are not into their competence scope. And they think that other experts have the role of addressing these issues. Instead, I believe, and we, as the keynote speaker said before, it is important to have an integration between scientific path and ethics reflection in the research. So I believe that it's important that researchers learn about ethical issues concerning their work and become increasingly confident with these issues over their training. So the first step is the educational training, and then over professional path. In this regard, I think that it should be very important to intensify ethical classes, ethical focus groups into the educational training, and also during the professional career. So maybe I can stop here and then I can continue.
So the key message is you perceive the researchers not to be so motivated, and we need to professionalize the inclusion of the ethics in their training, basically. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of institutions are maybe starting to move on to integrate it into the training for particularly younger researchers, but it's true, it's not always seen as a key component of people's professional trajectory, I think. Okay, thank you, Antonella. And finally, Aliyah, if you'd like to...
So I've given some of the answers in my question to Dorian. The fact that I feel that the main motivation for ethical, for tackling ethical issues is the fact that researchers are seeking for funding and to publish in high-ranking journals. And I completely agree with the objective of increasing awareness during the education period. And so I was wondering, in your institutions, is there an ethics section in, for example, PhD grant proposals? Because that doesn't exist in my institution. And I was wondering if we could, or even at the master's level, is there an ethics section in the master's dissertation? Do you have a review of the ethics part of the PhD proposals before the grant is given, or does it happen after?
To answer for my institution, it's a bit complicated. For national funding, regional funding, I have to be careful, it's quite political here, but for regional funding in Flanders, there is also an ethics self-check, which is quite similar to the European Commission one. So anyone who gets funding from that level has to go through the ethics procedure as well. The current rule is that for master's students, it's mainly the responsibility of the promoter to work through the ethics issues with the master's student. So we're a bit dependent on the motivation of the master's promoter or the master's supervisor. So yeah, we're a bit stuck in that respect, I suppose. One thing that does happen is that sometimes master's students get confronted with ethics because they're also legally required to do certain things. For example, I've got a student now who wants to go to Africa to collect samples of plants, and that falls under the Nagoya Protocol. So suddenly this poor student is confronted with a very heavy legal process that they have to deal with. And it's not ideal in terms of maybe motivating them to deal with other ethics issues. That's the first thing they're confronted with, but it does come up. And also with dual use, maybe you have kind of master's students who are maybe doing something that might be considered dual use, and that's maybe their first formal contact with ethics, which is perhaps not so great. But yeah, in short, it works at different levels. So there are some ethics checks, but I'll put the question also to the other panelists as well. Aura, did you have a response?
Yes, thank you. We do ethical review for PhD students as well. It's always done prior to data collection, of course, but we don't have counseling for when they're applying for grants. so these are kind of two different issues. We have a research funding unit, research funding services. They help our researcher when they are applying for Horizon Europe money or some big international money. But I think that we are discussing about the research ethics with that team more. I think we should give some more ethical instructions from that team also, because our ethical review process is different, but it's for the researchers and also for PhD students.
Antonella, is it the same at your institution?
No, maybe I can say, because as you said before, I'm working in an Horizon project, and I'm working as a bioethicist, as an external collaborator within a social enterprise, a not-profit social enterprise. And I'm working on a citizen science project in the environmental area field. And in this experience, we are debate about ethics, research ethics, and ethical issues of our project with citizens. No, so I'm experiences a dialogue with citizens about ethics of research, because in a citizen science study, if you involve citizens at all level, all stages of the study, no, from the design of the protocol to the implementation of the protocol, and share the results, citizens become citizen scientists, no? So in this case, it is relevant to transfer research ethics to citizen scientists from research by researchers, but at the same time to dialogue with maybe different point of views of citizens into ethics researchers. So maybe I can contribute to this debate with this input about engagement of citizens as scientists.
That resembles a little bit what sometimes I go as a linguist to train medical students on verbal and non-verbal behaviors with patients, and that resembles the participation of associations of patients in those debates. Like cancer patients would come and talk about their experience to the students, and there would be a dialogue on the behavior. So that there could be a connection there, and it's really interesting to just think in that way. In the research that I conduct, as we collect ecological data, we involve the families in our research, and there's a dialogue between the researchers and the families. But at the same time, it's always a sensitive situation, because we don't want to, I mean, we're not there to give them any advice on how to talk to their children, raise their children. It's absolutely not, we're observers and we analyze the behaviors. And it's complicated because as soon as, it's the same for patients, but as soon as you put families in contact with us, they want directives. And so I was wondering if in the case of your research with citizen, this issue isn't a problem.
Thank you. Yeah, because in my case, the area is environmental pollution field, no, but this engagement of participants in all stages of a study is a measure to be adopted also in medical sociological field, and a number of issues, new issues arise, no, and sometimes it is not easy as job because this dialogue involves maybe other elements compared to the normal dialogue between researchers, no, among researchers, between among peers. So sometimes it's not easy to address conflicts that can arise from different points of view.
So do you mean conflicts between non-research experts and citizen science? Is that the kind of conflict that arises? Is that what you mean?
As you know,
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, no, you're
the reverse, you have to put it on. Your mic is off, Antonella. Oh.
No, okay, I can say. No, just briefly, because as you know, conflicts are in scientific communities. No, we try to tend a common a common consent, but conflicts there are also into scientific communities, and the same thing happen into a group of citizens. No. And another possibility is conflicts between researchers and citizens. Sometimes it is not easy to go on, no? And part of the job in this situation is to address with this issue, trying to dialogue and take into account each positions. It's not easy, but to try a compromise.
But do you think in the long run it improves the research? Because I mean, it can be quite challenging for the researchers, but I suppose it's worthwhile to go through the conflict if in the long run you have a better result. Do you think? Or are you still at the stage where you're not sure what the result will be? You're still working out the conflicts? Because the idea is, the idea behind citizen science and all these kind of participatory processes, that in the long run the research will turn out to be better. Are you optimistic that that's the case with your project in the long run?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. Yeah, I think. Yeah, and thinking about the questions, no, for this panel discussion, and a suggestion I want to propose as input is the importance to introduce into the ethics classes during the educational training of future researchers, this topic, the topic of engagement of all stakeholders into the decision process, no, in order to before we learn about ethics by design, but also engagement by design, no, in all area. I'm optimistic, and I think that involving stakeholders could foster trust, society trust to science. This is another element very important as we learn by the keynote speaker.
Okay, thank you, Antonella. We'll move on to one of our other questions because we have quite limited time. I think it'd be quite nice to go to quite a practical question, which is what are the impacts of ethics evaluations for smaller institutions that do not have as many resources? Thought it might be interesting to put this to Aliyah first. Would you like to comment? So, yeah.
Yeah, so we decided to, well, the trigger for the establishment of an ethics review board was the fact that I was part of the research council, and I wanted to have an ethics approval for my grant submissions, even if it wasn't required by the national French agency, or even some of the European projects don't have that requirement. I thought it was important, and the research council wasn't enough, and so that triggered the fact that it was finally created. But everybody works voluntarily, of course, and we don't have any administration to help us. So the more submissions we would have, the less we would be able to tackle them, because it's only researchers' time, and especially all the administrative process is becoming quite heavy. So there's this kind of challenge that we want all the researchers in the university to be aware and to submit. It's not mandatory to submit your research proposal, to your research protocol to the ethics review board, but we would like them to want to submit it and to improve the protocol. But I'm afraid that if we do too good a job, we won't be able to continue. So it is a kind of catch-22 in our situation. And in terms of training the students, so the members of the review board are probably the people in their universities, the members of the university, and some external people who would be the better placed to commit to that training. But we also need funding for that training, because we cannot ask people who are already teachers and researchers to train the PhD students on their available time, which is non-existent. So that would be the constraints we have, and so raising this awareness, I really think there should be an ethics process before PhD proposals are submitted, because sometimes PhD proposals are accepted with protocols that involve non-ethical procedures, and so because the members of the boards who review the PhD protocols are not aware enough, and so once it's accepted, we have to make the PhD student change their protocol, and that could change the scientific goal, and it's very costly for them. So those are the types of challenges we have.
Also, a similar question to Aura. So you're in charge of the Social Sciences Ethics Committee at your university. Do you think these ethics protocols are creating these kind of financial and resource pressures on social scientists? Because it's pretty famous that social science and humanities have limited funds anyway. Do you see that kind of pressure on your researchers?
Well, yes, and I think this keynote already addressed it. This is something that we need to consider in all disciplines, and I think I would want us to be able to give more support for researchers when they are applying for funding, also in social sciences and humanities and behavioral sciences also. But we have limited resources in the advisors who give that support, so we have to make choices. So it's basically the big European fundings that we can be able to help. But also I think the major challenge in our university, because we are kind of big university, we have different kind of services. We have lawyers, we have ethical review board, and we have library and data support. This is a challenge for our researcher who is planning on the research project. The researcher is receiving advice from multiple advisors and trying to cope with all this information, and it's difficult. So it would be great if there was some project coordinator or someone who understands this entity, or is everything included.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite common to have these kind of consultancy bureaus who are working during the project, but they're not very interested in ethics either. I think they're mainly interested in getting the funding in. But do you think it would be interesting to have something like that that could function at the university level or at the pre-grant proposal, pre-grant phase as well, Aura?
We have kind of info sessions before grant applicants, but not that much more. So yeah. I think this is something that should be supported more.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I mean, I think from my perspective, we also see that a bit. We've got these new ethics committees that are appearing, and we've tried to have, for example, the internationalization. I'm a single point of contact for that. So that's something that we've done instead of the researchers having to figure it out for themselves. To say any kind of international research, you have one person you can contact, and then I filter it a bit. It does make my job a bit more boring because it's basically sending things to other people rather than actually dealing with it myself. But I think it's something we felt we've had to try. Also, one thing we've done is we put an ethics decision tree online on our website, which helps researchers if they start a project, which person they need to contact so they can kind of go through the process themselves a bit, and it kind of helps a bit. But I understand that as well, that you've got researchers who are dealing with a DPO and a committee for medical ethics and everything else, and often they're not communicating with each other either, so it gets quite intense for the researchers to deal with these different things. But thanks for your input. We've also got a few questions.
I see that in the chat box, there's something about plagiarism at VUB.
Yeah, I was going
we
to ask
have the
that
plagiarism,
yeah.
And it's a little bit of a different topic, but there could be a connection in training students both in integrity and in ethics. But I think a lot of universities now have this plagiarism check because there are software that can do it, but it's not the same thing to have a software and a human being.
Yeah, I was going to come to that question. It's from Toby Wigstrom from Iceland. So the question is about the concrete matter of self-plagiarism or recycling of prior publications by researchers. So Toby was formerly at an institution in the US, and there the promotion and tenure committee read all publications by the candidate for tenure, at least in the social sciences and humanities, so that they could then pick up on candidates recycling their work to get tenure, I suppose. And Toby's question is then, does this kind of thing happen in Europe, and what are the best practices for preventing this kind of recycling? So again, Ora, you're also on the integrity committee. So this sounds like a question that's quite close to what you do, is that right?
Yes, but in the committee, actually, we cannot always see this because it's the researchers' plans. It's a research plan, data management plan, all the information sheet and consent forms intended for the research participants. So if someone wants to cheat, that is possible in this, but we need the picture of the whole research process in that case. But we don't do that kind of checking. That we are trusting that the researcher is telling us. It is not a permit, it's a review process, and we are trying to help the researcher to get better with the plans.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really an integrity question. It's something I've come across. I mean, we haven't done that kind of check on people's tenure applications per se. I have had a case by our integrity committee where there was a problematic researcher who'd misrepresented his contribution as a promoter. So it did come up, but only later. I think it came up because a colleague, when they were looking at his tenure application or an extension of something he'd applied for, they did identify it. So it wasn't part of a formal check per se. It just happened to come up that this researcher had said he promoted certain things or been a supervisor of things he hadn't actually done. So in that way it came up. I think for the social sciences and humanities, it's quite a well-known problem of where the line is between self-plagiarism and developing ideas that already exist. I think especially in disciplines like philosophy, people are working on very fine-grained concepts over a long period of time, and it can look like they're just recycling the same old ideas when in fact they're making very fine distinctions. So I think it's certainly something you couldn't do by using plagiarism software. I think that'd be a very ineffective way to do it. And I think even for the panels, they have to have some expertise in the field to understand what it is exactly the research is doing. I would suppose that it might be good to send it to external colleagues as well for some kind of peer review because of maybe internal conflicts. So I certainly think it's something that can be misused because I've seen it happen, but I think you have to be very careful about how you would address this very specific issue. Toby, did you want to add anything to that or respond to the discussion? Is Toby still there?
I don't know if they can speak in this.
Maybe it's set up so they can't speak.
But maybe we can go back to the ethics issues because it's a different field.
Yeah.
Integrity is a different.
Yeah. So one of the other questions we had, we are getting very short on time now, but I'll just put in one last question, which was whether your institutions have set up new ethics procedures to address specific requirements for the European Commission. So have you changed your procedures or instituted new committees? Antonella, is that something that you are responsible for?
No, sorry, I just wanted to add an idea, an input about plagiarism, the topic we was debating just minutes before. From a theoretical point of view, from turning back to the individual motivation of researchers to address ethical issues, and for example, to not to act with plagiarism or fabrication data. I think that it is important that researchers realize that ethical requirements such prohibiting fabrication, falsification of data, plagiarism, promote important value of research, such knowledge, truth, avoidance of error. So adhering to these ethical requirements is fundamental to promote, as we heard before, an excellence of research. So I wanted to give this input.
I totally agree, but I think I would like to loop this back to the tension between when you talk about falsifying results and falsifying data or fabricating data. This also happens if you hide your data under the cover of protecting your participants. And so I want to go back to that tension between open science and open data, and data protection. It's really a big issue in some fields right now. And if we want to avoid fabrication and falsification, the only way is to give access to the data. And so we really have to try to promote this open access and even data sharing, because data is really costly. And I know I have a friend who died of AIDS when she was 24, and her father, who was a scientist in the field, told me if everybody had shared their data, she wouldn't have died. And so there's also that, so it's important to try to find the balance between data and data protection and open science.
Yeah, I mean, I think again it comes back to a question of motivation and incentives. I think it's something that can maybe be taken up more. Like, this is a discussion we had at another panel we organised in December last year about how you motivate researchers to participate in these open data initiatives. And one area is that it does have an impact on the excellence of research that includes the right minorities or groups or takes account of gender balance will be better quality as well. So I think, to me, that makes a case for this idea of actually evaluating ethics as part of the excellence part of a project, because the link is a lot closer than maybe the current way of evaluating would seem to show. And you need to find some way to really incentivize researchers to do that. I think also there should be more attention for projects that do this and actually generate this quality. So I think there should be some kind of platform for sharing really high quality, excellent research projects that have taken account of ethics. And I think that should be a role for the Commission to find some way of promoting these projects and saying, look, it really does make a difference. You know, this project wouldn't have been as good, or, you know, like you said, Aliyah, these people's lives maybe would have been saved because of better quality research. So I think that a more open panel or open forum for that would be good.
Is there a panel, a platform where you can find sharing training for ethics? Because in France, we've started having those, so there are video conferences in French that explain the ethics processes. And so is it possible for the European Commission to share support, you know, videos or PDFs to help us train the students? Because that's really something we need. Because even though I'm president of the ethics committee, I'm not trained to teach ethics, and so I need help to become somebody who could train students.
I think that's a really important point. We organise every year an ethics week, and since the corona crisis, one of the few positive things about COVID-19 was that we put this online. And we opened it up to people outside our institution, and the quality and the quantity of people participating really went through the roof. It was very good. And I think, like you say, we had a platform where there's a certain quality evaluation of these things that people can then participate in, be really good. I also think, again, coming back to incentives, it would be good if people participate in that, they get some kind of credit, so that if they participate in the 2-hour session, they get some kind of recognition, and maybe it would be a good thing for at some European level to certify the quality of the training that people participate. But definitely, I think in general, sharing the training and making it open really pushes the quality up. But Dorian has a hand up, so I'll let him speak.
Yes, thank you. This is the holy grail, right? How do we produce the material and how do we share it? We started building a database, a wiki type of database where you can also exchange and discuss. It's called the Embassy of Good Science. It's still early stages, but it's a priority because the member states told us that we need this. Unfortunately, for the moment, it's only in English. And we will be able to...
English is already good enough. It's better than...
But it's still early stages. We oblige all our projects in ethics and integrity, or the research that we fund, to produce material for training and education and to upload it in the embassy. So there will be a one-stop shop. Whatever we produce, it will be there. And we will invite the member states and organizations, if they have such material, also to... It's a public base. It's not something only for the European Commission. So hopefully that will catch up and we'll have a place to go and see, for example, they have material now for value-based training or role-playing or, you know, all these interesting tools that we have to do the education more interesting. Because let's face it, first year, second year, third year students, first year PhD students, you know, don't like to hear ex-cathedra teachings, right? So we are building it. So hopefully it will catch up soon.
So basically, the start of the platform already exists, which is excellent news. I think we can really encourage everyone to use that and go and have a look at it. I will certainly use that to promote Ethics Week if I can. Maybe
John and people who already have material could submit it to Dorian and this committee, this board, and see if it could be accepted to have links to it on your platform. And then maybe you could have links to support in different languages that you don't have to produce, but that might be produced in different countries. But of course, you need a process to review the content to make sure that it's up to your standards.
I've got a few messages coming in from my colleagues who are saying we're running out of time a bit. As the moderator, I'd like to thank all the panelists for a really excellent discussion. We didn't get to discuss all the issues or go into everything as much detail as maybe we could, but I think we've got some really good ideas. Certainly, we've got some things to check out, like the Embassy of Good Science and this panel on evaluating the assessment procedure. But thank you very much to Aliyah, to Aura, and to Antonella and Dorian for their contributions. Also to Jonas for co-organizing the session. Maryam, would you like to say a few words to close?
Well, thank you. It's been really, really interesting and I think fruitful for everybody to listen to this. Ethics, as we understand, it's not easy. It's not always wrong and right, and we could hear it here as well. And it's not as easy as we like it to be. So I think these kind of webinars and seminars are really important to contribute to the discussion. And I think Dorian said, one of your slides was about trust. I think trust in research is really, really important. If we don't have trust in our researchers, we won't go far. You know, in days that we hear anything about, yes, sorry, alternative facts and so on, it's important to stay to the facts. And in that sense, having trust in what you're receiving as facts and knowledge is important. So thank you, everybody, and thank you to the Commission, Dorian, and the panelists. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we will follow this up later on again for new discussions. So I won't take any more time, and thank you for the participants also for the good questions and everything. Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. See you some other time.
Thank you.
Thank you.